This part 2 video explains who else is behind the violence in Kashmir province in India besides Pakistan. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In my October 29, 2021 video titled Who from Pakistan is Behind the Murder of Four Sikh Soldiers and a Teacher in Kashmir and Their Motives, I stated that the goal of Pakistan is to annex India-administered Kashmir to itself, and that goal remains unchanged. Pakistan has continued to send terrorists to India, particularly Kashmir, who've carried out terrorist acts against Indian soldiers and civilians. Of course, Pakistan always denies responsibility for any such acts. But the widely known fact to the Indian authorities and other nations is that the terrorist acts in Indian administered Kashmir are the handiwork of Pakistan's Inter Services Intelligence Agency, or ISI, which sponsors and/or supports most of the terror outfits operating from Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistan launched the Resistance Front, or TRF, after the revocation of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir in 2019, which has taken responsibility for various terrorist acts in Kashmir in 2020. In June 2020, Army's 15th Corps Commander Lieutenant General B.S. Raju said, "There is no organization called TRF. It is a social media entity which is trying to take credit for anything and everything that is happening within the valley. It is in the electronic domain." TRF is supported by Pakistan and appears to be a rebranding effort to draw international attention to Kashmir issues, project the image that it is a Kashmiri organization, but its operatives are drawn from existing terror groups such as the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Indian Kashmir-based Hizbul Mujahideen and Al-Badr. This also indicates that Pakistan and Kashmir-based Muslims are collaborating in terrorist acts, as Hizbul Mujahideen and Al-Badr are Kashmir-based terror outfits. In my video, I explained that most of the terror leaders, just a handful of them in number, are people from India and Pakistan-administered Kashmir who have settled in the United States, Britain, and other countries in the European Union. Each one sets up multiple organizations to put up a facade of widespread support for their activities. They also have a handful of white American and British collaborators, likely German masqueraders in the United States and Britain. However, there is another side to the story of terrorism in Kashmir. Muslim leaders living in India and administered Kashmir are also engaged in fomenting trouble for their own nefarious ends. Agitation against Indian forces stationed in Indian administered Kashmir regularly flares up. There is stone throwing, sloganeering by young school and college students with the aim of projecting an image that Indian rule over Kashmir is not popular. However, these are not mass demonstrations. The most disturbing part played by local top level Kashmiri Muslim politicians and leaders is their support of terrorism against minorities, particularly Hindus. The reason is that prior to the 1990s, Hindus owned large tracts of agricultural and forest land and urban property in Jammu and Kashmir. Top level state Muslim leaders coveted that land and property. They contrived to acquire it with little or no compensation by clandestinely sponsoring terrorist acts against Hindus mainly, having hundreds murdered, which forced most of the others to flee the state for their lives. Then the top few Muslim politicians and leaders simply grabbed their lands and urban properties with the connivance of Muslim civil servants in the state. It seems this scheme was hatched in just before 1989 and began to be implemented soon after by murdering some important Hindus. Here is a small sampling of murders, terrorist acts, and Indian Security Forces or ISF retaliation in chronological order. On September 14, 1989, Tikkalal Taplu, a lawyer and a leader of Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP in J&K, meaning Jammu and Kashmir, was murdered in a brazen attack in the presence of several eyewitnesses. The killers were not apprehended, which sent deadly fear among the Hindu population in the Kashmir Valley. Fear only intensified when Taplu's murder was followed by other killings and terrorist acts in quick succession. On November 4, 1989, a judge of the Srinagar High Court, Neelkant Ganju, who had sentenced Makbul Bhatt, one of the founders of the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, or JKLF, with Amanullah Khan, for sentencing Makbul Bhatt to death, Neelkant Ganju was shot dead. In December 1989, in order to force the release of its terrorists, the JKLF kidnapped Dr. Rubaiyah Saeed, the daughter of the Union Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed. The government acceded to the demand and released the terrorists. On January 4, 1990, a newspaper in Srinagar published a message from the Kashmir-based terrorist organization Hizbul Mujahideen, ordering all Hindus to leave the Kashmir Valley immediately. Posters were put up asking Kashmiris to follow Islamic laws and dress code. Businesses, places of worship, and property of Hindus were torched or destroyed. On January 19, 1990, mosques declared that Kashmiri Pandits were kafirs, meaning infidels. Brahmin males were given three choices: leave Kashmir but leave your women behind, convert to Islam, or be killed. Incendiary messages to purge Kashmir of Hindus, Sikhs, and other non-Muslims were preached in the mosques. Kashmiri Muslims were enjoined to identify Hindus to force them to convert or be killed. On 21st January 1990, Indian security forces fired on protesters at the Gaw-Kadal Bridge, who were demanding independence for Kashmir, killing 52 or more of them. It led to more violence and demonstrations in the Kashmir Valley. On January 25, 1990, 4 Indian Air Force personnel were shot dead and 12 others injured at Rawalpura bus stand. Yasin Malik, founder of JKLF, was charged in the killings along with 6 others in March 2020. That's more than 30 years after the incident. On February 1, 1990, Krishan Kumar Barwa and Ramesh Kumar Thusu, central government and state government employees respectively, were gunned down. On February 2, 1990, Satish Tikku, a young Hindu social worker, was murdered in Srinagar. On February 2, 1990, Satish Kumar Tikku On February 12, 1990, M.L. Bhan, an Intelligence Bureau officer, was murdered. Other Intelligence Bureau officials subsequently murdered were R.N.P. Singh, Kishan Gopal, and T.K. Razdan. On February 13, 1990, Station Director of Srinagar Doordarshan, Lassa Kaul, was killed for showing programs on TV that were deemed un-Islamic. A Kashmiri telecom engineer, Deepak Ganju, was murdered in his home in front of his wife when he was hiding in rice canisters. On April 19, 1990, Sarla Bhatt, a nurse, was gang raped, her body mutilated when she was still alive, and then she was shot dead. On 29 April 1990, Sarvanand Kaul Premi, a Kashmiri poet and teacher, and his son Virendra Kaul were brutally murdered and their bodies mutilated. On May 2, 1990, Professor K.L. Ganju of the Sopore Agricultural College and his wife were taken from their home while having dinner and murdered. His wife's body was never recovered. On May 13, 1990, 31-year-old Veer Bhatt, a junior engineer in the state irrigation department, was killed in a hail of gunfire. On the same day, 27-year-old Ashok Kumar was first tortured, his limbs broken, and then he was shot dead. On June 4, 1990, a Kashmiri Hindu teacher, Girija Tiklu, was gang raped by terrorists, and then, while still alive, she was chopped into two pieces with a saw. On June 22, 1990, Balkrishan Tutu, an officer in the state agriculture department, was shot and badly wounded. He was taken to a hospital where the doctors let him die. This is just a small sample of the murders of Brahmins and other Hindus that took place in over a 9-month period. Many Brahmin women were kidnapped, raped, or gang raped and then murdered, often brutally, while their Muslim neighbors watched approvingly, who had earlier identified the potential victims for the killers. It is estimated that from September 1989 to October 1990, at least 315 Kashmiri Brahmins were murdered. Each of these more than 315 cases is the story of a similar brutal atrocity committed on Hindus, including torture and mutilation of the body while the person was still alive, and gang rape or being shot dead. These murders had the intended effect on the Hindu population in Kashmir of causing a mass exodus. Various estimates put the number of Kashmiri Brahmins or Pandits who fled the valley anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000, or from 70 to 90% of the population. About 250,000 Hindus live in squalid refugee camps in Jammu, another part of the state, but living still in fear of violence. The important issue here is that this violence to force the exodus of the Hindu population was orchestrated by the Muslim leaders living in the state. The pretext used to involve the Muslim population was Islamic ideology that Kashmir belongs to Muslims only. But the hidden agenda of the Muslim leaders was to grab the lands and urban property of the Hindus after they left the state. After the Brahmins and other Hindus fled the Kashmir Valley, Kashmir's top Muslim leaders, politicians, and bureaucrats did occupy their properties and, with the help of bureaucrats, obtained title to them. Once the Hindus fled Kashmir, there was no restraint on the Muslim leaders and powerful businessmen to keep them honest. After occupying property of Hindus who were killed or dead, then they started illegally occupying government land. To become legal owners of the government land, an act known as the Roshni means light, the Roshni Act of 2001 was passed, which is also known as the Jammu and Kashmir State Land Vesting of Ownership to Occupants Act. The act was named Roshni Act because the Jammu and Kashmir government planned to use the money so raised to fund power projects in the state. Now, under the Roshni Act, the illegal occupiers of land were granted legal ownership upon payment of a price to be determined by the J&K government. The cutoff year for encroached upon land was 1990. Apparently, more land was illegally grabbed by more powerful people later, resulting in the date being extended to 2004 and then to 2007. However, the price paid ultimately for the land and forests was so low that it is alleged that the state exchequer suffered a loss of $3.33 billion. The act was repealed in 2018. In November 2020, the central government identified the following persons as illegal beneficiaries of the scam: Farooq Abdullah, the former J&K Chief Minister; Hasib Darabu, the former J&K Finance Minister; Sajid Kichlu, the former J&K Home Minister; Majid Wani, a Congress leader; and M.Y. Khan, former chairman of the J&K Bank. In August 2019, Narendra Modi's Indian central government revoked the special status of J&K by repealing Articles 370 and 35A, bifurcating the state into the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. The Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is now governed by a lieutenant governor appointed by the President of India. The lieutenant governor appoints a chief minister and a council of ministers. Effectively, this reorganization gives the central government control of the state. The Modi government is trying to recover as much of the illegally occupied government land as possible. However, giving back illegally occupied private Hindu lands back to the original owners is proving to be a challenge because the Brahmins and other Hindus are afraid to return to the state to reclaim their properties for fear of violence and threat to their lives. Muslim leaders living in Kashmir are making sure that Hindus whose lands they have occupied do not return to the state by sponsoring or supporting sporadic killings and acts of violence. These terrorist acts are carried out by terrorists living in Kashmir or Pakistan based militants who infiltrate into India-administered Kashmir and commit terrorist acts with the help of Kashmiri Muslims. Some examples include on October 1, 2012, Indian security forces killed 5 militants belonging to Hizbul Mujahideen, a Kashmir, India-based terrorist outfit. On November 9, 2012, ISF killed 4 armed militants engaged in a major infiltration bid. November 14, 2012, Indian security forces shot dead 6 militants belonging to the Pakistan-based terrorist outfit Lashkar-e-Taiba in Baramulla district. December 2nd to 5, 2016. December 5, 2014, in separate attacks on army and police personnel and civilians, 21 persons were killed and 9 civilians injured. On January 2nd to 5th, 2018, a terrorist attack carried out at an Air Force base in Pathankot in Punjab, India, by militants of Pakistan-based terror outfit Jaish-e-Mohammed, and mop-up operation by ISF over the 4-day period. 6 terrorists and 7 ISF personnel were killed. On September 18, 2016, in an attack on an Indian Army camp at Uri, 4 armed terrorists belonging to Jaish-e-Mohammed lobbed grenades, killing 19 military personnel and injuring 19 to 30 more. All the 4 terrorists were later shot dead. On December 31, 2017 to January 1, 2018, in an encounter with suspected JEM terrorists, 5 ISF personnel were killed and 3 injured. 3 militants also died in the gun battle. Then on February 10, 2018, in an attack by Jaish-e-Mohammed militants at Sunjwan Army Camp, 6 Indian Army soldiers and 1 civilian were killed and 11 injured. 4 terrorists were also died in the attack. On February 14, 2019, at Pulwama, a local Kashmiri youth from Pulwama district carried out a suicide attack in a vehicle on a convoy of vehicles carrying Central Reserve Police Force personnel, killing 46 of them and injuring 20. The suicide bomber was also killed. JEM claimed responsibility for the attack. This indicates that Pakistan-based terror outfits are supported locally by Kashmiri Muslims also. More recently, on October 5, 2021, an entity called the Resistance Front claimed responsibility for the deaths of 3 people. Makhan Lal Bindru, the prominent Kashmiri Pandit and owner of Srinagar's most famous pharmacy, was shot dead at his shop that evening. Minutes later, a street vendor, Virendra Paswan, a Hindu from Bihar, was gunned elsewhere in Srinagar. Almost simultaneously, another civilian, Muhammad Shafi Lone, a non-Kashmiri Muslim, was killed at Naid Khai in Bandipora. All the targets were non-Muslims. On October 7, 2021, a Sikh lady school principal, Supinder Kaur, and another Kashmiri Brahmin teacher, Deepak Chand, were gunned down by terrorists and killed in Srinagar, Kashmir. On October 11, 2021, 5 Indian Army soldiers were killed, 4 of them being Sikhs. The shootings were carried out by Pakistani infiltrators in a mountain pass near the line of control in Indian part of Kashmir. The following day, 5 rebels were killed by the Indian armed forces. With these recent terrorist acts, we cannot escape the conclusion that Kashmiri Muslim leaders and big businessmen are doing everything in their power to continue to warn Kashmiri Brahmins and other Hindus to stay away and not return to Kashmir to reclaim their lands and properties which they now illegally occupy. A Kashmiri Brahmin, the diplomat through Lokinath Kaul, orchestrated the murder of former Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri in Tashkent, Soviet Union in 1965. His descendants will pay dearly for that dastardly crime. Many Indian Brahmins have murdered Americans or British adults or children or Sikhs to gain the financial rewards offered by the Germans. They too will have to pay for their crime with their lives. For the same reason, Kashmiri Muslims, high or low, leaders or followers, will have to pay with their lives for the crime of murdering Kashmiri Brahmins, other Hindus and Sikhs to drive them away from from Kashmir, so that they could grab their lands and properties. This is a warning also to all those who contemplate committing such crimes in the near future in Kashmir. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available online on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that facility. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.